this, I thought, was a very good example of a clash between the West, and it wasn't even known as the West in those days, the Western powers, and China. And I can use that story to illustrate and to focus on how China and the West gets on today, basically.
You are telling that Boxer Rebellion story too from the other side, aren't you? You're giving the Chinese point of view, which in terms of our history, we never hear.
Exactly. Slight spoiler alert here. Yes, you do get it from the Chinese point of view. I speak Chinese. I lived there for 18 years. My family is Chinese, and and it's a one-man show. So I, with tremendous respect, in no way any sort of caricature. And in fact, the Chinese audience, it's their favorite part of the entire show. Yes, give the Chinese perspective, and I don't hold back. In my marketing materials, I say how the play is called Chinese boxing, and it doesn't pull its punches, and it's especially the Chinese side that doesn't pull them, and that's the point, or that is the content that really makes people think and realize. Of course, it's balanced, and in total there are three characters. They're all interconnected. You're looking at the same. They're all looking at the same episode from different points of view, and gradually the audience realizes how, and the dramatic irony is fantastic.
That's clever. Now, look, you've already said you lived and worked in China. You met your wife, raised a family. 18 years of your life spent in the People's Republic. But your interest, your fascination with the country started much earlier. Tell me about it.
Very simply, although these things aren't simple, I suppose. I was a bit of a linguist at school. Did European languages, Latin and ancient Greek, and I had a fascination with the Far East that sort of came to your typical teenage boy trying to work out the world and life and religion, and that was encouraged by a very open-minded and liberal and wonderful housemaster at my school. And then, as I was about to sort of stick a pin through the UCA University Handbook, it was the early 80s. Deng Xiaoping, the leader of China after Mao Zedong, said that he was opening up China to the outside world. And, China had been closed pretty much for the previous almost, well, gosh, I don't know where you would start but communist China had been closed to the outside world. And I thought, here's my opportunity, here's a wonderful opportunity to get in somewhere early and make a life and a career and use what I consider to be my linguistic skills. So off I did.
Now, was there an economic side to your career? Because you eventually ended up being a publisher.
Sorry. Yes. Yes, I wanted to go and make my fortune. Like, I wasn't going to be a drug dealer like Suarez and Jardines, but there was the expression, make your China fortune. And there were, I'm not the only person who thought along those lines. There was my sort of cohort, that generation. There were quite a lot of us who did what I did, which is study Chinese, get out there and build various businesses. And mine turned out, I actually went out there as a metal trader. I worked for 3 years for a very good metal trading company in London who taught me everything about business and business in China, sent me out there. And when I was there, I thought, actually, I don't really want to be a metal trader anymore. I want to step up and become a journalist. And within 6 months, I became a publisher of my own string of magazines. And that was my media career, and it exploded.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, don't be modest about this. You were a very successful publisher.
You're very kind. I was a very successful, very foolish one. I chose an industry that is the way I describe it, is the most tightly controlled yet loosely regulated in China, in information, propaganda, power. The party controls it all. But doesn't know how to make it work. And so people like me could sort of slip in, work within the system, constantly having to work with the government in very close quarters, as it were, and fighting them quite a lot too. And I found a way, and it was all going very well. It grew and grew and grew. Basically, what I created was something equivalent to Time Out across China for the three main cities, Guangzhou, Shanghai, Beijing. And it got to a point where it was just too big. And the Olympics were coming up, and the Chinese Publishing Authority, or the government, wanted to control everything. And they took over my business.
You retreated to the hills.
I did indeed. I had a heat retreat, I had a house rented in a heat retreat that was established by missionaries in the early part of the 20th century. And yes, it was originally intended just to be a sort of weekend getaway, like the Cotswolds or North Norfolk from Shanghai. But when I lost my business, I faced a choice. Oh, well, perhaps I probably should have sort of moved on from China, but I was still very much invested, well, not financially, but my life was there. I wanted to stay. I had a young family, and I also had a lovely house on a mountain, 200 steps from the road. I'd paid the rent in advance for 10 years. I thought, well, why not go and use it? And so that's where we went.
What brought you home?
Sorry?
What brought you home eventually?
Again, another simple answer, children, education, time for them to go to a proper school. Also, myself, I needed to get back on with life. I'd basically taken midlife retirement in my 40s. My children had grown from 0 to 10 roughly. We'd had this lovely spell on this mountain. My children could run ragged over the hills for miles and bump into an old lady who knew someone everybody knew everybody. It was bliss. But it wasn't somewhere that I could live forever, much as I'd like to have done. And so I sort of had to wise up. But the key reason was for the children to come to a school in England.
Well, we've talked about your career in publishing, and you are also and are an author. You've 2 books on China to your name, and also as far as 3 books. Sorry, I've missed one. Also, while you were in China, you were acting.
I did, yes. Well, so as I said, I was trying to build a sort of Time Out type magazine across China, and that involved getting involved in arts and culture. I lived, it so happened, next door to the Shanghai People's Arts Theatre. I used to go to their plays, review them. I got to know the writers and the actors. And one day they had a part for a foreigner. And they asked me, they said, can you act? And I said, well, I've done a bit at university. And actually, when I was a student in Beijing in '86, I put on cabaret. No, what did we? No, that was '96. Sorry. I put on The Importance of Being Earnest
Oh,
in
fabulous.
as a student. That was good fun. And I'd done cabaret with a sort of amateur, well, all the diplomats and students in Beijing in '96. That was great fun with a full audience in drag, including several ambassadors.
Now, were you speaking English or were you speaking Chinese,
I
Mandarin?
mean, in cabaret, it was English, but the play that I did in Shanghai was fully in Chinese with some quite major Chinese stars in it. It was called Fate of the Stocks. It was a lot of, again, information, propaganda, education through media and the arts and culture. It was designed to educate the masses about stock markets. And
Mark,
I,
sorry to interrupt. Do you still love the country, or is it a sort of love-hate relationship now?
it's a nostalgic relationship now, let's say.
Okay.
I I certainly did. When I was there, yes, I wouldn't. Yes, the simple way of putting it again is love hate. It was love and frustration. It could be very frustrating, especially I don't want to big myself up here and make myself sound like a missionary even, but I wanted to help. I wanted to do good in China. Um, and my magazines were doing that and would have continued doing that. And then they got taken from me and basically ruined. They're still existing, by the way, still making money for those people. Uh, and that really frustrated me and saddened me. And the love was, well, I loved helping. I loved doing. I was in Nor very, very quickly. I was in Norwich, where I used to live in Norfolk, and a Chinese lady in a restaurant came and embraced me when she found out that I was the person that created those magazines, because that's how she learned English.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, look, after your solo performance, after the show has finished, you're staying on stage and offering a Q&A session, a question and answer. And I suppose the biggest question of all is, can the West and China coexist? Can we get along with each other?
It is. You're right. You got straight to the hardest one. I was hoping you were going to say Taiwan or Tibet. I can see. Uh, yeah, the Q&A tends to be quite serious, but I lighten it up along the way with anecdotes and illustrative stories of my time in China. I was a columnist for Prospect magazine. Do you remember that? Do you know that?
Yes, yes.
I was their China columnist, and my job was to illustrate the bigger picture of China by telling anecdotes about life in rural China, and it worked quite well. Have I dodged the question yet?
Yes.
Um,
It's a big question, and
yes,
there is no, I'm sure, simple answer.
yes, we absolutely can and we should. It is extremely difficult though. We both, this is the crux. We both, the let's call it the West at the moment, we have to change our thinking about China. And China has to change its thinking about the West. We are simply so embedded in our, deep rooted in our not prejudices or bias, but what do we call? We're just stubborn. We
Yeah.
just think we're right. I mean, let me give you a very simple example. In the West, in our society, it is, ignoring what's going on in America, it is wrong to lie. It is shameful, and it's just wrong. It's a sin. In China, there's no such thing as a lie. What you're actually doing is you're telling the other person what you think they want to hear. It is polite. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to make your life easy. And when this situation occurs, especially in a business sort of setting, the foreign businessman goes, "Do you laddie?" Oh my God, they bullshitting us, the lying bastards, blah, blah, blah. Can I say that word? Sorry.
Yes, you
Um,
have.
I just did. Uh, and yet the Chinese side is going, why is he so upset? We were trying to be nice to him. That sort of thing. And then there's a myriad more sort of things that we just don't get about each other. And that's what I tried to do with my show, is explain some of that stuff.
Yes, my final point to you, because I must let you get on and enjoy your Sunday, your day of rest, is we are living in difficult times. There are
Interesting
many
times.
trigger points in the world. I mean, you briefly skirted over things like Taiwan and Tibet, and obviously, while Trump is saying he can just grab Greenland, there's no reason why China can't just grab Taiwan. Who are the real powers on this earth now?
Hmm. There's a Chinese curse, by the way. We think it's a blessing. It's a curse. May you live in interesting times.
We certainly do.
We certainly do now, and we don't. You don't want to be. You want to be living in boring times. China is, yes, it is one of the major powers. It's slightly beyond my pay grade, but yeah, America, Europe, Russia, um, Australasia, perhaps. But no, China. The thing with China is that China in Chinese, 中国, means center of the world. They see themselves as, the Chinese see themselves as the center of the world. Everything, all foreigners, not called foreigners in China, you're called outsiders. Waiguoren, outside people. Laowai is supposedly a respectful way of saying, the old foreigner. It actually means you're a bit weird and alien. They are, they are not a nation state. They are a civilization state. This is really deep rooted in their psychology. And the party has encouraged the population of China to think that they should recover their rightful place in the world, the China dream, restoring itself to its original position as the center of the world. Now, the trouble is that the world has changed since China, and China was, in its day, the height of its powers toward toward the 8th, 9th, 10th centuries, and later in perhaps getting towards, no, we'll just leave it there for the moment. It was the center of the world. It was the most powerful country in the world and most civilized as well. But we now have America, Africa, a strong, developed Europe. I mean, Europe back then was we were shooting arrows at each other on the Battle of Hastings, and they haven't allowed for that. They sort of can't, because it's again so deep rooted and so encouraged by the party. So whether it will somehow emerge as the world superpower, as America basically was, the world's policeman, I personally sincerely doubt it. I don't think it. I don't think it has the ability to, because it has so many internal issues to deal with. I don't think it actually has the will to. There's a lovely Chinese saying, sitting on the hill and watching the tigers tight. Tigers? Tigers, stop! That was a good one.
I love it.
I'm doing dry January as well. I don't know how that came on.
Excuse me,
Watching
my
the tigers
turn.
fight.
Mark, it's fascinating to talk to you. It really is. And at the end of this podcast, I will give all the information about your performances in Bath from the 27th to the 29th of January. Very quickly, you're also doing a book signing.
I am. I've got my third book, which has only just come out, which is why you didn't pick up on it. So I've written 2 China memoirs, and I published a novel earlier this year. Oh, last year. My silly joke is the novel is the true story. It's called China Running Dog, and it's going quite well. And I'm going to do a quick book talk on the Wednesday midday at the Theatre Royal. But it's very similar to the Q&A. I mean, the Q&A and the book talk are pretty similar. It's talking about China and the West today, and obviously in a fictional setting. Yes. And can I just say that Sir Claude, I had a word with him earlier, and he's very much looking forward to coming down to Bath and meeting the Royal Asiatic Society there.
You're no stranger to the theatre, of course.
Well, yes, lucky me, I had 2 jobs there last summer, which and I spent a lot of time in Bath, and it was, yes, very enjoyable indeed.
Mark, thank you.
Thank you, Richard.